Good afternoon. Welcome to the Big Show. I am Paul Zeise. The Big Show comes to you every day at 5 o'clock. We try and talk about whatever is happening in the world of sports. We try and figure out what it is that is on your mind. Of course, the Steelers today, they did what everybody gets really excited about, and that is backs on backers, right? The backs on backers in the first day in pads. And so it's one of those things that it is going to be the next couple of days, basically, to see what happens. Of course, unfortunately, Mother Nature did not really cooperate today. Mother Nature basically said, you know what? We're not going to let you do backs on backers and live hitting and all the other stuff that you guys love to do and people love to see. And we can actually start talking about the team because there were storms rolling through. There was a bunch of storms in the Latrobe area, obviously, and so they had to basically postpone practice. So probably have to wait a day to start to really make good evaluations as to what is going on in terms of the ability to hit and the ability to hit each other and play in pads. And, of course, what we really like to do is see guys that aren't in shorts and aren't in T-shirts basically actually hitting, because that's football. I just don't really get the idea that, it's one of those things where people get excited about the first 4 days of camp. When it comes down to it, who really cares? Because they're in T-shirts and shorts. And so it's amazing to me, I think, that people pick apart every single way they can pick apart the first 4 days of camp. We want to see them in pads. We want to see them block. We want to see them tackle. And that's where I'll tell you, I like camp when it begins, the blocking and tackling part. Now, it's funny. We've talked a lot about the offensive line yesterday, but the offensive line clearly is one of the areas you can't really evaluate until you get a chance to see them in pads. And that's where I would tell you, really, the realistic thing is that they have to hit in order to understand how good they are. And I think that's really why we like to watch them in pads and everything else. Interestingly enough, George Pickens, no longer a Steeler, finds ways to basically just sort of say stupid things. And his latest was talking about the Cowboys versus the Steelers. Now, good. I'm not one of these people that believes that you have to always, sort of defend the honor of the Steelers. There are some people in this town that do. I don't. But when I hear stupid things, I generally am going to respond to them. I generally am going to say that's really stupid. George Pickens was asked, he did an interview and he was asked about his time with the Cowboys. And he has basically said, that he is really, really likes the locker room and the fan base. And he feels really good about the locker room, and that's why he feels like it's going to be a very, very good time for him there. They're going to win and all that other stuff because, and I love this one, but because it's a situation of where the Cowboys, I watched that team for so long and the camaraderie of the Cowboys. Like, I kind of understand the camaraderie more now than I did in Pittsburgh, which I don't know if that's a complete shot at the Steelers, but what he's basically essentially trying to say is that the camaraderie with the Cowboys is a lot better than it was with the Steelers. I don't know that I completely buy that. I just don't. I think one of the things that you have to, really be careful with is when he says things like this, to just try really hard to take it with a grain of salt. But then he said something that I think is pretty hilarious. He said the Cowboys are known for the Super Bowl. That's what they're known for. If they weren't known for that, then no one would care about the Cowboys. But they're known for that. then the camaraderie of the people give that same energy because they also want to see it again. So I think definitely understand it more here. The more people here than I did up there because I'm from the South. Okay, let's talk about that statement because that might be the stupidest part of this entire situation. The Cowboys are known for the Super Bowl. Well, that's great, except for the fact that the Cowboys have not even played in a Super Bowl since 1995. And albeit they did beat the Steelers in that Super Bowl. But guess what? The Steelers have been to 3 Super Bowls and won 2 of them since. The Cowboys are known for being the most overrated team in the entire league. That's what it comes down to. Every year we hear about the Cowboys. We hear, wall to wall, the national networks. They just dissect the Cowboys and overrate their talent. Talk about, how great they are. And usually they're a bust. They are pretty much a bust. If you look at what they've done since they're, okay, good. 1995, they beat the Steelers in the Super Bowl, the Neil O'Donnell 2-pick game, right? Okay, good. The next year, they still had pretty much all the same cast of characters. They were just a year older, and it kind of, I think they lost a couple of guys on defense or whatever. They ended up losing in the second round of the playoffs. So they won a playoff game in 1996. Here's where it gets a little bit dicey, okay? 1996, they won a playoff game. You want to know when their next playoff win was? 2009. Then 2014, then 2018, then 2022. And here's the other thing about that. Those 4 playoff wins, okay, their 4 playoff wins since the Super Bowl, all of them, all 4 of them, they're all wild card games. They haven't won. They haven't been out of the wild card round. They haven't gotten past the divisional round since they went to the Super Bowl. I mean, we want to talk about the Steelers, and of course, you could sit here and say, well, they at least, the Cowboys, at least they won. At least they've won a couple of playoff games in the last 8 years, unlike the Steelers. But if you look at the Cowboys, they are 4-11 since they went to the Super Bowl, and all 4 of their wins are in the wild card round. The wild card round, which, again, okay, at least they've done that, and the Steelers haven't done that. But a team that's known for the Super Bowl, you'd think they would have at least 1 or 2 divisional wins, right? They don't even have that. So I just feel like, maybe these people that talk about the Cowboys all the time, and the Cowboys, the whole discussion about the Cowboys drives me absolutely insane. From the standpoint of they are always overrated. Always. They're always the team that everybody thinks is going to be good. We have to hear about Dak Prescott. We have to hear, before that it was a running back that was moderately good for a little bit. They had Tony Romo. They had these teams with a couple of big names on defense, and There was even a time where they were talking about, oh, my God, the Cowboys. Look at how good these guys are. Look at how talented they are. Look at how much Jerry Jones and company, we want to rip them, but look at the talent they've put together. Give me a break, will you please? Here's the thing. Yeah, they had a moderately good defense the other day, or last year, whatever it was, 2 years ago, but they still didn't win anything. And all those young guys they keep touting on defense. I'm going to tell you, my biggest pet peeve with the Cowboys is the way that they're covered. Honestly, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the Eagles have been to, I think, 3 Super Bowls maybe in the last 10 years, and they've won 2 of them from the same division. But they don't get covered like the Cowboys do. The Cowboys, to me, are the most overrated team in any sport anywhere. And I think that's honestly the truth. You cannot point to a team in any other sport that gets more overrated than the Cowboys. And you could sit here and say, well, what about the Yankees? The Yankees at least win their division pretty much every year. They get to the playoffs pretty much every year. They've been to the World Series a few times. Haven't won one since 2009, 2009. But the bottom line is they've been to a couple of World Series. They're in the playoffs every year. They get to the ALCS a ton. So, no, they're not really overrated. They just can't win the biggest games that they need to win. You know, in basketball, the Lakers sometimes are overrated because of, basically because of the star power they had. But the reality is the Lakers have won things more recently than the Cowboys. I mean, Notre Dame football, yeah, okay, but they've been in the playoff 4 or 5 times over the last, 10, 12, 13 years. What have the Cowboys done that they merit all the attention that they get all the time? Just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I get to a point where I get tired of the Cowboys. And when I hear a guy like George Pickens trying to explain how the Cowboys' camaraderie and they've got it figured out more than the Steelers, that's just dumb. Pickens, to me, is a guy. And look, I'm a free speech advocate 100% all the time. But sometimes because you can speak freely in this country and say whatever you want to say, the reality is maybe you should just shut up. There's times when you probably should just shut up. And I think this is one of those times. I think this is one of those times where probably just shut up. And the more that he talks, the dumber he sounds. So I feel like, when we look at George Pickens and all these stories that people write about him, every single one of them has the same exact theme. Somebody in his camp needs to tell him, George, shut up and play. I'm sorry if that offends people. Oh, are you trying to say shut up and dribble? No, that was a whole different discussion, and that was a stupid one too. I'm saying just because you have a microphone in front of you, just because you have the ability to speak out, just because you are able to say things, it doesn't mean you're supposed to. Sometimes, you know what, the best thing you can do is just be quiet. What is that saying? Something about better to keep your mouth, better to keep your mouth shut and be thought of as a fool than open it and remove all doubt. And that's what happens with George Pickens every single time he plays. Hopefully he's good. Hopefully he has a good season. I'm not somebody that's rooting against him. I'm not somebody that, thinks, he's a bad guy and all this stuff. I just think he's very immature. And if you're very immature, you need to grow up. But there's another reason why he needs to grow up. You want to know why? Because he's playing for a big contract. That's why. You want to go get $30 million? You want to go get $35 million or whatever the top receivers are making? Guess what? Go have a season where you deserve it. And one of the best ways to do that is just to not say stupid things, just to focus on playing football. I mean, I look back to Antonio Brown. You can say whatever you want to say about Antonio Brown, and there's a lot we can all say about him, obviously. But here's my thing. The one thing you can't say about Antonio Brown is that he didn't bring it every single day, every practice, every single game. Were there times when he probably, needed to do things a little differently? Yes, there were. Did he say stupid things as well? Yeah, obviously he did. But who was the first guy on the field and the last guy to leave every single day? Antonio Brown. So you lived with it because, again, for about 6 years, he put together what was probably the best seasons collectively of any receiver in the history of NFL. You want to do that? Okay, George, say whatever you want to say. But until you do that, enough. Just tired of these guys. I think one of the things I'm tired the most of, and it's not just George Pickens, it's this idea that, athletes have been empowered now, and so they can say whatever they want to say and control their own destiny in terms of they don't need to be filtered through media relations people. They've got Twitter, they've got social media, they've got their own videos. They can put stuff on YouTube and TikTok. You know what I'm tired of? The idea because they have the right, or anyone has the right, to say whatever they want to say, that A, they're supposed to be able to say it and not be criticized, and B, that they don't have somebody smart enough close to them saying, listen, I'll be honest with you, this isn't a good look for you. Why don't you just be quiet? Just be quiet. You don't always have to say something. I'll tell you where it's the most prevalent, and I'm not going to get too far into this, but the WNBA. You want to talk about a league full of people who have no self-awareness and just spout off because they think they should or they can, or because they want to get noticed or seen? What about that league? Some of those people need to shut up, because the more they talk, the less we like them. And that's not being haters and critical and misogynist because they're women. No, it's because you're saying stupid things that show a lack of self-awareness. That's why. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Stop whining. Anyway, George Pickens, listen, God bless him, but the idea that somehow the Cowboys are a team that are known for the Super Bowl is silly. Yeah, they've been to the Super Bowl a little bit back in the day, but again, it's been 1995 is 30 years now. 30 years since they've been to the Super Bowl. So I don't know. I just feel that was probably as dumb as the idea that there's more camaraderie with the Cowboys than with the Steelers, just from the standpoint of, now it is interesting. The Steelers are similar to the Cowboys in this regard. The Steelers are really, really, really convinced that the Steelers are really convinced, just like the Cowboys, that they're still relevant. They haven't been relevant for a while. They're relevant from the standpoint of their brand, just like the Cowboys. But at the end of the day, you got to start winning again. And maybe you will, but you got to start winning again. And I think that's where sort of the disconnect is in my mind when it comes to the Steelers. When you were winning every year, when you were winning playoff games every year, when you were, in contention every year, when you were a threat to get to the AFC title game every year, when you were winning division championships every year, absolutely. You were one of the teams. But right now, the teams that are most relevant in the AFC are the teams that probably have had a little more success than the Steelers. The Chiefs, obviously. Recently, the Ravens and the Bills. Now, the thing about the Bills to me is they are right on the cusp of becoming that team that just never, ever gets over that hump. And I'm not talking about like the four, teams. I mean, you get to 4 Super Bowls in a row. I don't care that you didn't win them. That is impressive. You've gotten over the hump. You've won. Everyone, well, they can't win the big games. They won 4 AFC title games in a row. I'm talking about this Bills team can't even get to the Super Bowl. And if they, Josh Allen's still young enough, but they got to start figuring out how to win games in the playoffs, these tight, close games against the better teams. Same thing with the Ravens, because that window can close very close, quickly. And then some of these other newer teams come along. Houston, maybe, I don't know what they've added this offseason, but I'm assuming they're going to be a little better. The Chargers now in year 2 of Jim Harbaugh. The Broncos, year 2 of Bo Nix. I mean, some of these younger teams or newer teams are going to come along, and if you're the Bills or the Ravens and you haven't gotten over the top yet, it could be difficult because now you've got more competition than when you started. So I'm just getting here telling you that, right now the teams that are the most relevant are the teams that I think are the teams that are winning right now. You know who's the most relevant team in Pennsylvania? The Eagles. And one of the things I've often said is if you were a Steeler fan, and, Steeler fans are very, 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 some of them are all about the fact of consistency, and the fact that never losing seasons and all this other garbage, right? I say to everybody that will listen, and most people won't, and I wouldn't listen to me either, but what the hell, right? 2020, they went 4-11-1, the Eagles. Now, if I told you were going to have a 4-11-1 season in 2020, right? But you could trade with the Eagles that year, where I think the Steelers were 12-4, weren't they? And you get all the Eagles' next few years, what would you say? Obviously, if you look at it, they've been to 2 Super Bowls since then. They've won one of the Super Bowls. So, yes, 5 years ago, they had a losing season. Not just a losing season, a disaster, 4-11-1 season. They recalibrated, they put it together, and 2 years later, they were in the Super Bowl. 4 years later, they won the Super Bowl. So, okay, they have a losing season to their record. Does that make them worse than the Steelers? In the minds of some Steeler fans, I think it does. But it just, in my mind, it doesn't. Don't give a rat's behind about non-losing seasons and consecutive non-losing seasons and all that other stuff. The Steelers have a lot of Cowboys in them. They really do. They have to figure out how to get over the hump and start winning playoff games again. Or else, it just becomes a thing of where they're kidding themselves. Now, I'll tell you one thing that's really interesting to me. And I've talked about this openly. The Steelers went out and got a bunch of veteran guys to try and win this year. They went out and got a 41-year-old quarterback to try and win this year. They went out and tried to build a roster to have a chance to win this year. Is it one of those things where if they don't win a playoff game, it's the end for Mike Tomlin? Someone's got to take the fall if they don't win a playoff game this year. They've kind of gone all in to try and win a playoff game. Not that winning a playoff game is the be-all, end-all, but they kind of put all their chips in. Hey, let's try and go and take a run. Let's take one run at it, right, with Aaron Rodgers. Let's sign Aaron Rodgers and see if we can take a run at it and see how far we can go. You've already changed general managers. You've already changed both coordinators multiple times. You've changed quarterbacks multiple times. There's only one change left. Only one. And I'm not saying that he's on the hot seat. I'm not saying that they would even fire him. But are we at least allowed to have that conversation? Or are we going to be shouted down as haters? That's what I would like to know. I would like to know, are we allowed to have that conversation? If they don't win this year, if they don't win a playoff game this year, are we allowed to finally say, maybe it's time to change the coach without being accused of being haters? Because again, I go back to this. Throughout this 8-year run, they've changed coordinators on both sides of the ball. They've had multiple coaching changes on both sides of the ball. They've changed general managers. They've probably changed scouts. They've added a guy like Andy Weidel. So they've, changed assistant general managers. They've changed quarterbacks. We've seen different renditions of the defense. They've redone the offensive line at least twice. At some point, does the buck stop at the top? That is really, to me, one of the most important questions that I ask going into this season. Are there finally expectations on the head coach? And I get a kick out of people who, they won a Super Bowl. He won a Super Bowl. Are you doing math? Because my math is he won a Super Bowl 17 years ago. Do you know how many coaches have won a Super Bowl since that have been fired? Even guys like Tom Coughlin, who won 2 Super Bowls, was fired. Doug Peterson's been fired twice. He won a Super Bowl. I mean, at the end of the day, how many more years do you get the milk out of, I won a Super Bowl? And again, I know, Dwight say players have to perform. Again, I get it, but when the same variable is not a variable for 8 years in a row, what does that tell you? I'm just telling you, I think this is one of those things where they went all in to try and win this year and get better this year. And I got to believe that sooner or later, the finger gets pointed at the head coach, and people that point it aren't going to be shouted down as haters. That's what I hope. Just not sure, that's all. Just not sure if that's where we're at. By the way, the game's always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's on Carson Street. Archie's, home of 80-cent wings, Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. Get down to Archie's. Tell Archie I said hello. When you get there, taste my sandwich. They have a brand new pretzel on the menu that's unbelievable. Soft pretzel. It's a big soft pretzel. It's really, really good. I had one last night. It's really, really good. So get down to Archie's. Great time. Football season coming up. Archie's is open every Sunday for football. So make sure that you get to Archie's and tell Archie I said hello when you get there. Real quick. Not real quick, but the Pirates. I read today Noah Howes had an interesting story where he talked about trade deadline and basically made it seem like the Pirates are less and less likely to trade David Bednar and Mitch Keller, to which I say, what are they doing? One of the things about the Pirates that always drives me nuts, they hold on to players too long. Always. And then they trade them when people know they have to sell them. And their value is not what it should be. That's the case with Mitch Keller. Right now, you can actually trade Mitch Keller and get something for him. Do you want to know why? Because it's a seller's market for Mitch Keller. But if you hold on to him for 2 years, or a year and a half, everybody knows you got to sell him because you're not going to be able to sign him to another deal. And all of a sudden his market drops. Why not trade him while his market is high? Because the bottom line is you're not going to be good for another 2 years. So everybody on this roster that you don't think is going to be around 2-3 years from now to help you win should be on the table, which is, I made the case the other day about Skeens. But I don't have a problem holding on to Skeens for another year or two because he's so good you'll get something for him no matter when you trade him. David Bednar just went through a whole bunch of arm trouble. Now, and he stunk for a while, but now he's playing really well. He's pitching really well. He looks like an elite closer. Trade him. He's got control, a couple more years of control. Trade him right now when his value is high, not when you know that you're going to have to trade him because of his contract. They hold on to people too long. They're just not going to go out and make deals. I don't believe this. I think this trade deadline is going to stink. I think it's going to be boring. I do. Think it's not going to be all that interesting. Could be wrong. But it sounds to me like they're doing that thing now where they're going to overvalue their own players and convince themselves that they need to hold on to them because, right around the corner, we're going to start winning. Well, in order to start winning right around the corner, you're going to have to start signing guys to make real money. And they just don't do that. And they're not going to do that. So why are we kidding ourselves? Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Why are we kidding ourselves and holding on to guys that aren't going to be a part of whatever it looks like when it gets rebuilt? And believe me, we're to the point now where let's stop kidding ourselves. This 6-year experiment has been a failure. An absolute failure. Very few players have come from this 6-year rebuild. And quite frankly, the one that came here the most is Paul Skeens. And I don't know how much credit we really need to give because that was one of the most no-brainer picks of no-brainer picks that there could possibly be. And he just so happens that he's every bit as good as advertised. I don't know that they get a lot of credit for that. Maybe they should. Maybe they shouldn't. At any rate, trade deadline coming up Thursday. I just hope it's a lot better and more interesting than it sounds like it is. Seems like they're setting it up to be very, very boring.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.